will introduce to you probably two gentlemen who many in the room know. First, who knows Dr. Calegan? He gets applause on introduction, right? He's so well known. He's just an incredibly talented and caring neurologist at the NeuroMedical Center. What can I say? He got his degree, medical degree at Tulane University. He did his residency at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And we know how hard he works. He's helped many of you in the room. We know how much he strives to stay on top of the literature and the latest information about Parkinson's disease. So he's been here for this conference from the very start, one of the original organizers, and has sustained us throughout that effort. In addition, then, maybe less well known, how many people know Randy Leblanc? So he does have a few friends, right? Randy's been right here as well from the second year, I believe, of the conference, and has been a prime motivator, indeed a mover and shaker in the Parkinson's community. Helped us with this, helped us with many other things. His background is mechanical engineering, and he proceeds in life like that. It seems to be that there's no problem that can't be analyzed and fixed, including his Parkinson's disease. He hasn't taken a negative attitude. He's taken a very proactive attitude in researching literature, almost like a scientist, but more like an engineer. How do we fix this and go forward? Nothing seems to hold him back. Even the devastation of the 2016 flood, which just impacted him personally to a great extent, but he's climbed back as he always does, and so he's here to give us what's going to be a very enlightening session. I'm pulling out of my pocket here the formal title. So they're sort of a tag team today to present to you self-advocacy, taking personal control of your Parkinson's disease, a patient and doctor's perspectives. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what a distinguished group of speakers here I have the pleasure of being among. When they were looking for bios here, I said, well, this is going to be real easy. Doctor, Randy, doctor. Okay, so my professional career has nothing to do with the Parkinson's, but again, just my experience, like Don said, is why I'm here. So in June of 2005, neurologist here in Baton Rouge walked in the room the waiting room where I was, and he asked me to get up and walk around a little bit. And within about 2 minutes, he looked at me and said, "I'm afraid, my friend, you have Parkinson's disease." That marked the beginning of a 14-year adventure that brought me to this place, standing here before you speaking. Today, as someone who has walked a similar path as you, I'd like to share a few of my experiences along the way, and hopefully some of my experiences can help you in your journey with Parkinson's, or to help motivate you a little bit in your dealing with the problems with this disease. 2 quick notes for you. First of all, when I was diagnosed, I had just turned 46. So the problems or my experiences and yours may be a bit different. If you were diagnosed in your 30s or your 50s or your 70s or 80s, it could be very different. The challenges we face have a lot to do with the age at which we're diagnosed. The other thing is, I did have deep brain stimulation surgery last year, and I know it can be very laborious to listen to, so please bear with me here. One of the things it definitely affected was my speech. We figured this talk would be better later in the day, because this rock star neurologist with me over here would hold more people later in the day, and I'm glad to see this great crowd that's still here. But, you know, about 4 weeks with the speech therapist at NeuroMedical Center, probably would have done a little better if I were a better student and did my homework, but such is life, you know, so again, bear with me. I do have a degree in mechanical engineering, and by my very nature as an engineer, I have a need to fix things. In order to fix it, I have to understand what's broken and why. So in the beginning, back in 14 years ago, I did a lot of research on how it could be fixed and what the problem might be. The information back then was very, very limited. There were a lot more opinions than scientific research available. If you think back 14 years ago, the web was pretty early on back then, and you really didn't have Dr. Google. I think we maybe had Dr. Yahoo back then, but he really wasn't too friendly. So if you put something about shaking, you might get something on porn or something other than what you really wanted. But a lot of the medical professionals at that time thought that it was better to wait before you took the dopamine drugs because of the side effects. And in my simple engineering mind, I thought that was probably a good idea. So I waited a number of years before I took anything. In retrospect, I'm not really sure that was the best choice for me back then. My quality of life those first few years was not great. You know, I can remember dragging my weary body across the parking lot from my office to my car, and the 13-mile trek from work to home was a bit challenging at that time. I continued to read everything I could get my hands on about the disease and the treatments. One thing became very clear to me. If I was going to succeed in combating this disease or living well with it, I needed someone who specialized in Parkinson's disease. Like you've heard already in this talk today, in these earlier talks, I was looking for a movement disorder specialist. I called a friend who was a neurologist, not a movement disorder specialist himself, and asked for his advice. And that's how I ended up partnering with Dr. Calegan. And the rest is history for me. So, Dr. Calegan.
I want to thank everybody for coming out. Thank to the committee members, all of wonderful people here with Parkinson's and their family, all the sponsors in the back in the booths. I really appreciate everybody's help here. Let me find my slide here. This is the first time we've done it this way. I hope it's the right way to do it. Okay. So really the point of today's talk is really, I think the most important one is Randy's talk. He's been through this. He can give firsthand experience and guidance on how to make our way through this disease. How do we advance? Am I doing it? It's not letting me.
All right, we're not computer experts here. One of us anyway.
Okay, I got it. I think one very helpful thing to do is to educate yourself about Parkinson's and to know the difference between, for example, what a tremor and a dyskinesia is, so that when you are speaking to the doctor, especially on the phone if you're having a problem, so you're speaking the same language. Sometimes patients call and I'm not sure, you know, they understand the terminology, and sometimes they'll tell me they're having a tremor when they're in fact they're having a dyskinesia. It's important because the way that you treat these two problems are really the opposite. So it's much better, more efficient, especially some people live hours away, and I like to just lay eyes on them myself, but maybe they live very far away, or maybe it's very hard for them to get in because of their mobility issues. So it's really good for me to be able to make a simple adjustment over the phone sometimes to help you, save you a lot of time and trouble and speed up the recovery. It's important to know a lot about your medications, know the names of them. Sometimes it's good to know every medicine has two names. You know, it's very confusing as a generic name and a brand name. So it's good to know about your medicines, to know which one may be more of an issue than, you know, another one. I think the more you know, the better. It's great, like we talked about Dr. Google a lot. There's a lot of information out there on the web, a lot of bad information, a lot of misinformation. My advice would be to stick to the major websites like Michael J. Fox Foundation, Parkinson's Disease Foundation, Davis Finney Foundation. Those are reputable websites that can really be helpful to get good knowledge, good accurate information about your disease. You want to? While we're doing some troubleshooting, I'll just talk a little bit. People often ask me about supplements for Parkinson's. I would say just kind of be wary of supplements for Parkinson's. There's really no supplement that's been shown in good studies to help Parkinson's disease specifically. So I would say, at least not yet, maybe we do further studies and we study the right supplements at the right doses in the right people, and maybe we'll find a way, we'll find one that is helpful. Until then, my advice would be, you don't really need a supplement for Parkinson's. We'll talk more about diet later. I would recommend spend your money on getting a personal trainer, a gym membership. That's way better. Good quality food, way more high yield, way better use of your money and time. I think that way. Here we go. Okay, we're on. I'm just going to back up a little bit. We're on track now. We might need your help to go back and forth. Don't go anywhere. Okay. I would say also be cautiously optimistic when you read about clinical trials about Parkinson's on the internet. So a lot of exciting research going on, and we're very excited about that. But understand a lot of things work in a mouse model of Parkinson's or in a petri dish, but as it turns out, we're a little different than mice. So sometimes a lot of things actually work in mice or in petri dish, but don't actually work in humans. It's vastly more complicated. Even our animal models of Parkinson's, they don't really have the same Parkinson's you have. We have found ways to make them look like they have Parkinson's, and we study that, but it's not quite the same. And then even the things that do work, only a small fraction of those compounds make it to phase 3 human trials, which is the ones where they evaluate to see if something works in a large group of people in different centers. Only 14% of those are successful. And even those successful ones, they got to duplicate it and do it again in a different study, and only then do drugs get approved. And that process takes 12 years and $2.6 billion per drug that gets approved. So we're very excited about things, but we have to take it with a grain of salt. But I really like how we're really looking outside the box. With Parkinson's, we're looking at a lot of other compounds that we didn't used to look at. We're looking at drugs for diabetes. We're looking at antibiotics. We're looking at antibodies, so all kind of things we didn't used to study as much. So it's very exciting. I'm going to let Randy take over now again.
I'm gonna jump to, I'm good. You don't need to change slides. We'll leave it there.
Okay.
We'll jump to the, okay, I want to talk about sharing your diagnosis. One of the earliest difficult decisions I had to make was when to share my diagnosis with the world. Almost, of course, immediately my wife and my kids knew that I had Parkinson's. Nobody else. My two older kids they were already out of the house. Our youngest was 11 at the time. I was 46 years old. I was employed as an engineer at a local chemical plant. In fact, I still am. And I was nowhere near ready to retire or be put on disability. So everybody was sworn to secrecy at that point until we could kind of sort this out. Through about 3 years prior to my Parkinson's diagnosis, I had shoulder surgery. And folks would come and ask me, oh, why are you walking so stiff? Arms not swinging. I said, well, shoulder surgery. I blamed it all on that. Got away with that for a while. I used it as my excuse. But then the next thing we did, my wife and I met with a local attorney who specialized in American with Disabilities Act, just to see what my rights would be, just to make sure. And really like that experience too much because he kind of wanted to go into dealing with my company more confrontationally than what I felt I needed to do. So what we decided was I would just go ahead and put the trust in the people I worked for. And I wrote a letter to my HR manager explaining what, what I was dealing with and what my diagnosis was. And my trust was very much rewarded by these guys. They basically, we sat down, we had a good long talk about it, and he said, you pretty much tell me what you need when you need it. That lasted for probably about 12 years. Then, when my dyskinesia got really bad, they started to get a little bit antsy, so it's changed a little bit. But I'm still fully employed by them. They don't let me go out in the plant anymore, but they pay me a lot of money to sit in the office. on these hot summer days, I really don't mind that. So, but I do a lot of big projects out in the plant, and my guys come back with pictures. I built a coolant tower back in March, and I called it the alleged coolant tower. I told my guys, I said, if y'all are photoshopping this, I'm going to be really angry. And on a more serious note, everybody, you all have to consider your own situation. If you're early on and you have not disclosed this to your employer, your friends, your family, for whatever reason, then again, you have to consider what's right for you. There's no right or wrong time. There are a lot of excellent resources, the websites that Dr. Calegan put up there that do discuss this matter. So if you're struggling with it, please go have a look and see what you can find, if you can find the information you want there. I'll share with you one experience I had. I was in our rotating equipment shop one day, and one of the craftsmen came up to me and said, do you have Parkinson's? And I said, well, what would make you think that? He said, well, I have an aunt who has Parkinson's, and I recognize the symptoms. Well, he was right on the money. I said, yes, I do, but please keep that between us. And for about 6 months, every time I went in that shop, that guy would come see how I was doing. The reason I share this with you is because just the fact that I had that one guy that I could confide in was very, very comforting to me. So when you do disclose it, it's going to be very different. I was very surprised at the people who came to see me after I disclosed it. I was also very surprised with the people who didn't understand that people handle illness very differently, and you have to be patient with them. There's some but once you do, they'll open up. So to me, it's very good if you can, you know, get it out of there, get it out of the, into the public. So, you want to talk about that a little bit?
I don't have much to say here, except that want to reinforce, it's just a very personal, individual decision. There's no textbook algorithm how to do this. Every case is different. It's a case-by-case basis, and you have to consider a lot of things. You have to consider your career, your job, disability, insurance, family, friends. There's a lot of things to consider. My advice would be to talk to people in the support group who've been through it. They can really give a lot of insight. One other thing I'll say is, one thing I've noticed is, you know, it's very admirable. Some people work so hard in their career, and they work maybe a little longer than they should, you know, and as admirable as that is, I think it can take a toll on their health. The increased stress, the decreased sleep, not being able to exercise, not having time to even eat healthy. It takes its toll. I've been very pleasantly surprised at some people who retired, you know, maybe right on time or even earlier than they should, and they really thrive. I mean, their stress level goes way down. They have a lot of time to take care of themselves, and it really can pay a lot of health dividends. So don't be too much of a hero, and talk to your doctor about all the nitty-gritty problems that you're having. Bring a list. The doctor can document this in the record, and it can really help you get what you need. Stress, you know, fatigue, those are things the doctor can't see, and he doesn't understand necessarily unless you tell him or her. So talk about how hard things are at work, how tired you get, trouble making complex decisions, all of that. Very important stuff. So just consider that.
I don't think you showed me all that last summer, so
Sorry.
we really can't talk about Parkinson's without discussing the importance of exercise. Exercise, exercise, exercise. You heard it from every speaker here, and you're going to hear one more time. So I can't say when I was first diagnosed, I was really told by my first doctor and Parkinson's, you know, the neurologist I was dealing with, that exercise was important. But I read enough, did enough research to understand that I needed to do it. My wife bought me a bicycle right after my diagnosis, and that first summer I would ride 5 to 10 miles a day just around my neighborhood, and more on the weekends. That summer I logged 600 miles on my bicycle. What I did find is how much it helped me when I did it. Just that repetitive motion to me was very good. My Parkinson's has never manifested itself as resting tremor. It's been bradykinesia, slowness of movement. One of the big issues I had early on was typing. I really had trouble moving my fingers. I couldn't hardly move the mouse on my computer at work. After I rode my bike, my fingers worked well. Couldn't really, you know, it's kind of hard to see that connection between pumping your legs and your fingers working, but trust me, it worked very well for me. I continued riding and eventually bought myself a better bike. Started taking it on trips with me. One thing I've learned since is in the hill country of Texas and in Birmingham, very hilly city where my daughter lived, I found out why they have all those gears on bikes. But no, it improved me tremendously. Prior to having Parkinson's disease, a good afternoon, like Saturday or Sunday afternoon to us, was to have a good lunch and maybe take a nap or watch a movie and just kind of lay around all day. My wife loves a rainy day, so, and that was, I say a lot of you probably enjoy that kind of a day. After Parkinson's, it looks very different for me. If I have a day like that, I am absolutely miserable the next day. I have to get up and move. When we go visit our kids, they know have work ready for Dad, because he's not going to sit around the house all day. Got to get up and do something. I like to say a Parkinson's brain at rest forgets. If you don't do something on a very regular basis, it's going to be an issue for you. Of course, aerobic exercise is going to be better, something that gets your heart pumping. But anything that gets you out and gets you moving is going to be good for you. I suggest you find something you like. If jogging sounds like it's going to be very good for you, and you hate jogging, then you're not going to sustain that. Ride a bike, or ride bike together, or a tandem bike if you want. If you like to play tennis, ping pong, anything that gets you out and moving. Just don't go home and sit down. And try and time it with your medicine. If you try to exercise during your off time, I think you'll be very discouraged. So you want to try and time it correctly. Next thing I'm going to talk about is diet. I don't know if I should be talking about diet up here, but anyway. So late in December of 2014, at one of my regular appointments with Dr. Calegan, I asked him if there was something I could get involved in, clinical trial, some type of research. I had finished a 5-year clinical trial with Dr. Rao in New Orleans, and it was time to get into something else. And he suggested I give the ketogenic diet a try, Dr. Don back there. Ketogenic diet, was very controversial back then, and there wasn't much information. Now it's become a fad diet. Like we were talking about at the break, if you're doing it for weight loss or just simply to try it, it's not that easy, but if you're doing it for your Parkinson's symptoms, you may want to consider it. Being an engineer, I had to research this diet. It just sounded interesting to me. The fact that you can eat bacon 3 meals a day sounded okay. that really wasn't what fascinated me. It was learning about the Krebs cycle and all the pharmacology behind what was happening in the body. So I thought that was interesting. Plus, there's a lot of cool tools you can buy out there. So I got a breathalyzer. I got the little blood monitor to read my glucose and my ketone levels. And I jumped in full force. After my normal Christmas fattening up, I decided I would start this that January. And I was able to sustain it for almost a year and a half. During that time, I'd say about maybe 2 to 3 weeks to a month into it. At that time, I was having off time on a normal day, anywhere from 2 to 5 hours a day. So I was sitting at work one day, waiting for my off time, and it never came. It never came till I got home that afternoon and had finished my last dose of levodopa. It had worn off. I had 0 off time during the entire day. Didn't change my medicine, didn't do anything different but this diet. And that sustained itself it repeated about 3 or 4 days a week for me until I got off of it. I got broadsided by the flood of 2000, and that's when I got off of it. I've tried several times to get back on it. Some variation of it. We try it off and on and just kind of get things back in control, but I've never been as successful as the first time. I won't tell you it's an easy diet. It takes some planning, and it probably takes about a month or 2 to really get yourself in a rhythm with it. Once you get there, it was okay for me. Like Don said earlier, it's not for everybody. Their diet can drive your cholesterol through the roof. We know people it's happened to. I did take the time to see a lipidologist, Dr. Sanamon, who was at Baton Rouge Clinic. I believe he's at St. Elizabeth's now in Gonzales. And he did a full workup on me every type of cholesterol you could find in your body. Basically said, keep doing what you're doing, it looks great. A1C went down, I got off blood pressure medicine. I had been on for 10 years and I'm still off of it. So I believe in that one. All right, I'm gonna try and pull a slide up here. Let's see if I'm a little better at this, maybe not. I got it. No, not here it is. Where? On this. Oh, bear with me, I'm never done, and I'm any better than Dr. Calegan. I'm trying to stop. To do that. No? On that. Okay, I think, does anybody in the room ever feel like this at night? It's pretty much how I feel quite a bit. I can only say a few things about that elusive thing we call sleep for those of us with Parkinson's. I jokingly tell folks that sleep is for the weak, but truly I would give anything for a really good restful night of sleep. I don't think I've had one in a long, long time. Most of that is due to Parkinson's. A lot of it is due to my personal nature of having to think about everything, including work. There's that stress thing Dr. Calegan was talking about. Maybe when I retire in a while, I won't have to do this anymore. But I lived exhausted. I was working on 3 to 5 hours a night, at the most, sometimes only 2 hours. After my DBS surgery for the last summer, for the first time in years, I now have to set a clock to wake up for work. I do have my share of sleepless nights, but even my wife and my dog sleep better. We thought it was because we were all getting old, but we found out it was me. We fixed that. Okay, I'm going to let Dr. Calegan take over at this point.
Great. So, my favorite topic, what I call the 3 pillars of health. If Parkinson's was an Olympic event and sleep, diet, and exercise were drugs, they would be banned substances because of their performance-enhancing effects. And they're the biggest things you can do to make a difference in your disease. I think besides taking your pills correctly, assuming you're taking your medicine, this is by far the biggest thing you can do. And the great thing about it is that it puts you in charge of your disease. I think it's tempting to feel like you have a disease you had nothing to do with getting. It's bad luck and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, it's not really true. See it make a huge difference, all 3 of these things. And I wish I could talk an hour for each one of these things, but I'm going to try to keep it short. Poor sleep, and this goes for everybody in the world, not just people with Parkinson's, but poor sleep, and I'm talking about just getting 6 hours as opposed to the minimum 7 hours we should all be getting. But even getting 1 less hour of sleep per night is linked to anxiety, depression, dementia, shorter lifespan, increased appetite. So it affects our hormones. We have hormones that regulate our appetite, ghrelin and leptin, they're messed up. And people eat an average of 400 extra calories per day when they get 1 less hour sleep than they're supposed to. People get in more car accidents. They have more falls. They tend to exercise less when they're sleep deprived. And the list really goes on and on. I really don't have room to list everything. Those are the big things. Take-home messages are get at least 7 hours of sleep per night. And I'm not saying 7 hours in bed. I'm saying 7 hours of sleep. So all the time that you have to add the time it takes you to fall asleep, add the time it takes you to get up and go to the bathroom and fall back to sleep, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 times. Add all that, and that's how long you should be in bed. You should have a sleep routine. We are creatures of habit. Our bodies love routine. So, and we have a natural circadian rhythm. So figure out what that is. Go to bed at a certain time every night. Get up at a certain time every morning, even on the weekends. It's going to really help you. I find caffeine is a big problem. I would recommend limiting caffeine to one caffeinated beverage in the morning, whether it's tea or coffee. Caffeine has a half-life of 7 hours. So even if you only drink 3 cups of coffee in the morning, you're still that's 14 hours later when you go to bed, that's 2 half-lives later. That means 25% of that maximum caffeine level is still going to be in your body when you go to bed. Caffeine really messes up sleep. This is proven in many, many studies. And then as mentioned earlier today, good sleep hygiene habits, very important. I give patients a 5-page handout on sleep. A lot of it is going over these sleep hygiene habits, which are extremely high yield things you can do to improve your sleep quality, such as getting 7 hours and having a routine and limiting caffeine. But there's a lot of other things that I don't want to get into a long lecture on. But you can look up good sleep hygiene habits. They're all over the internet. Lots of good recommendations out there. Good job of building that, I guess. Next, I'll talk about diet, and this is something we emphasize a lot. Diet, exercise, sleep, emphasize every year at this conference, rightly so. I will say that you have to understand it's very hard to study diet correctly, and Dr. Chitnis alluded to this. It's so true. They're epidemiological studies. It's not the right way to study something. We try to look for trends, but you can't do a placebo-controlled trial for diet because you can't control every single thing a person eats, much less a large group of people, much less over a long period of time. And there's nobody that's going to pay for that. So therefore, we have to go on anecdotal evidence, observational data, animal studies, basically third-rate science. There's not one diet that's good for everybody. People don't agree on what is the best diet. Even my recommendations are not based on a lot of great science, and I say that every time I talk to people about diet. I could be wrong. I say you have to try different things. There's not one diet that's established to be beneficial for Parkinson's, but I think what most people can agree on is that we should be eating real food, so meat, fish, veggies, some fruits and nuts. I think everybody would probably agree with that. And to avoid processed food, sugar, seed oils, all of which are inflammatory. So one other thing I'll mention that doesn't get a lot of press is protein. Make sure you're getting enough protein in your diet. And this is loosely my recommendations for women and men: 100 grams per day for women, 150 grams for men. It's important to get protein because you have to maintain your muscle mass. As you get older, your hormones change in such a way that you tend to lose muscle mass. The fancy name for that is sarcopenia. If you look up the data on that, it's linked to very bad medical outcomes, falls, disability, dementia even. It's an easy thing to miss. So you want to maintain your muscle mass so you can stay ambulatory, stay walking for longer, and have less disability. Randy mentioned I'm a big fan of low-carb and keto diets, but it's not for everybody. I'm happy to talk to people about that. Some people thrive on other diets, and that's because we all have different metabolisms. And until we have more data, this is just going to be one of my theories. But the other two things I'm talking about, exercise and sleep, those are rooted in deep science. Speaking of exercise, it's also going to improve everything in your life: your mood, your sleep, your energy, your balance. The people who exercise with Parkinson seem to have a slower progression. They seem to have less disability over time. They are on lower doses of medicines. They have better quality of life scores, so they basically feel better. Not to mention all the non-Parkinson's related benefits such as reduced heart disease, longer lifespan. And in Parkinson's patients, studies show with exercise, the more you do, the better. When they quantify people in different quartiles of exercise, they'll take a big group of people and divide them up according to how much they exercise, the people who exercise the most in the top quartile, and then the next 25 percentile, you know, not so much, and further on. And it's a clear dose relationship. In other words, the more you exercise, the more benefits you get. I recommend 3 types of exercise, and I think you should do all 3 if you're following all the recommendations and everything that the studies say. Cardiovascular exercise, very important. Got to get your heart rate up. You got to sweat. Like Randy said, find something you like. There's not something magical about riding a bike. It's just easy to study in Parkinson's patients. You can swim, you can run, you can row, you can walk, you can jog, you can do elliptical, whatever it is. Just get your heart rate up and try to do it multiple days a week. Resistance training, it doesn't have to be fancy weights in the gym. It can be using resistance bands at home, doing body weight exercises. These things are cheap. You can do them at home. There's videos online that show you how to do it for free. It's all online. Some kind of stretching is very important. Ideally, you're doing yoga, Pilates, or Tai Chi, but even simple stretching is very good. And lastly, get a personal trainer. Professional athletes get personal trainers. Why shouldn't all of us, including myself? So we're not experts, and so hire an expert, even if it's just 1 or 2 sessions at a time. Every so often. I know it's expensive, but again, it's better than buying supplements. Trust me, you get much more out of it. All right, I'm going to go on because I'm already past my time, and they're going to get mad at me. But I'm going to keep going a little bit. It's very important to prepare for your appointments. I wish I could see my patients, you know, every month, but it's really just not practical. Most people only see their doctor 2 to 4 times a year, so I'm going to try and give you some tips on how to make the most out of it. First of all, bring a detailed medication list, and I have a sample in the packet that you have. I made a sample medication list. Next recommendation, bring a detailed medication list. And I'm going to go over it in a minute. What it does, it really allows the doctor to, if it's a 15-minute slot, I can spend 10 minutes just asking questions on how you take your medicines. That leaves me 5 minutes. Now, I do take the extra time, and I go over, but that's why I'm late all the time, because I have to get through these things. It's very important. But if I don't have to do that, it will allow me, or whichever doctor it is, to really spend that time trying to fix the problems that you're having. Bring a problem list with you. Not only will you not forget to mention something that's very important, but it forces you to think about what your biggest problems are. And once you put that to paper, I think you might find that you're all of a sudden prioritizing what are the most important things, and that allows us to focus on the things that are the biggest problems. A few things I'll point out about this medication list. If you notice, I'm breaking it up into regularly scheduled medications at the top, as needed medicines, and then supplements. Don't forget to include supplements. Under as needed medicines, notice I put how often the person's actually taking them, because when they put PRN, the doctor doesn't know if they still might take it 3 times a day, or they may take it 3 times a year. It's important for us to know that, without having to ask for every single medication. So just put it on there. Make sure under the top regularly scheduled meds, if you have Parkinson's, you have to put the clock times that you're taking your medicines. Again, I can spend 5 minutes going over this, or I can look at it and try to problem solve and help you. But with Parkinson's, unlike most other diseases, it's actually pretty important to know when you take your medicine. And then off to the side, I'll maybe put a comment, yeah, but I often forget to take this dose. Maybe the doctor will have a tip to help you figure out how to remember to take it every day at that certain time. Or maybe you need an adjustment. Maybe you don't need to take it then, and we may need just an adjustment. Notice I put which doctor's prescribing the medication, so that way I know which ones I need to refill and which ones I don't need to refill and which ones don't get duplicate prescriptions. All these are practical things that really just take more time than they probably need to, and it's not the best use of your time, which is really the most important thing. And your money. You're paying good money for this, you might as well get the most out of it. Problem list, this is pretty self-explanatory. Just make a list of the things that you're having problems with and maybe questions that you have for the doctor. I can glance people that bring in lists, and it's mostly engineers. They bring in a list, and I love it because I can usually very quickly kind of answer several of them in the context of some of the issues I see with their medicines and what's going on. So all this is very high yield stuff. Quickly, I'll talk about living positively. Many studies show objective health benefits of this too. This probably is the fourth pillar of health, if I can have a fourth pillar. But that's a vague concept. You know, what does that mean exactly? How do you do that? I'd say first you have to educate yourself about how to do that, and I think meditation's important. It's not just for yoga instructors and Buddhist monks. I'm actually trying to work on this myself because I think it's something I don't do and I want to know a lot more about. But based on what I read and research, it's tremendously beneficial health-wise. But there's books, podcasts, classes. Once you learn about it, I think you can practice. There's classes that can help you with this. There's apps for your phone. There's at least 3 very good meditation apps written by professionals who have written books. I would say don't forget to go outside. There's something very powerful about sunlight. It helps regulate our hormones, our circadian hormones that help us sleep, hormones that make us happy, make vitamin D. There's just tons of great health benefits from going outside. And you can combine that with exercise and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Don't forget to try to eliminate toxic people from your life. If you have friends or family, well, family you can't get away from that. Maybe you can minimize it. But try to get those people out of your life or minimize your exposure to them. Try to avoid politics, news, social media, and TV as much as you can. Those things do not correlate with health and happiness. And lastly, just be kind to yourself. Treat yourself well, you know, take a vacation, do something that helps you relax. You got to. All right, those are my tips. I'm going to let Randy come on.
A little bit less clinical talk on living positively, attitude. To me, it affects everything you do as well as how others treat you. It's a lot easier said than done sometimes. But, you know, one of our poster childs, Michael J. Fox, his book talks about how he slipped into alcohol abuse for quite some time after his diagnosis. And then he pulled himself up by the bootstraps and decided he needed to make a difference in this disease for other people. Most of us don't have the celebrity to attract the attention that he does. But in our own little way, we can all do something. And I want to share a couple of experiences with you. You can compare PD to a lot of other choice diseases and consider yourself lucky, but that doesn't make it any easier. My wife's glaring at me. I'm not speaking clearly, am I? Okay. Mourn your losses appropriately. You have losses here. We all have. But do it appropriately. Don't fall into a long pity party. Go ahead and vent, and that's very healthy. And then settle in with your new normal. Learn how to live with it. Find something that you can do. I used to have in the early days what I called my rip the buttons off the shirt days. Come home from work very frustrated and just completely worn out. Go to change and try to unbutton my shirt and couldn't. I just pull them all off.
Like Superman?
Yeah, not quite, but. So now I still have my occasional meltdowns due to frustrations, mostly with other health issues, but I try and live positively for myself and others. Dwell on what you can do, not what you can't. When I was first married, I became very interested in woodworking. The first thing I ever built with very few tools was a baker's rack that's still in our kitchen almost 40 years later. Over the years, I built toys for our 4 children, swing sets, other miscellaneous items around our house. A few years after my diagnosis, I was out in my very crowded small shed using a bandsaw, and I almost got my hand caught in the blade because of my slow movement. I got very frustrated. I walked out, I locked the door, and I told my wife, I cannot do this. This is not safe. I will not do woodworking again. When my oldest grandson was born, I said, well, you know, I really need to make something for him for his first birthday. So I went back in my shop, unlocked it, and it cleaned up, and I said, if I take my time, and I'm very careful and patient, I can do this. So I did. I built him a little toy fire truck. I guess I should go back to my slides. Yeah, I'll show you what I built. I got a call about 6 months later from people at the Parkinson's Disease Foundation from my sister's health. All right. And they had a thing called Creativity in Parkinson's. They had a calendar they put out every year. I hung on the wall of my office. People did paintings and, I mean, just some really cool stuff with their, really cool stuff with Parkinson's. And pushing the wrong button. I can't see it. Okay, thank you. That's my attitude thing. Depression, we'll skip that one. Charlie Brown hanging his head. He says, don't you hold your head up high. It's kind of hard to be depressed with your head up high. So, my mind always races with so many things that I want to get done today. My body says, slow down there, Sparky. I have that all the time. I plan on doing a good day at work, invite somebody over to help me, and I have to sit down and watch them work. I hate that, but it does happen. But anyway, back to the fire truck story. So I decided to put this in on their database, and I got a call about a month later from a lady named Carlin Schroeder in New York. She said, we'd like your fire truck to be in our calendar. And there it is. So if you can't read the caption, I won't read that to you because I will lose it up here. But that's what I built for my grandson. That's when I resurrected my woodworking. I since have built double beds for both my daughters. I built furniture for the house. And my most favorite, I built toys for all 6 of my grandchildren. I love doing that. Just recently christened a 1,000 square foot woodworking shop, and I'm having a ball right now. All right, so why did I tell you this story? What's my point here? Very simple. My point is, don't let the beast win, okay? I gave up early on. I had given up for several years, and I got back into it, and I won ultimately. So, yep. Again, your attitude has a lot to do with it. That's something you can control yourself. I still make jigs to keep myself safe, keep my hands out of my saws and everything. Since my DBS surgery last year, I'm a lot more steady, but now that I'm 60 instead of 50, I'm a lot less stupid, so that does help. You might not want to publish your Parkinson's disease. I'm sorry, Jan, I'm using it all the time.
No, you're fine.
Okay. You might not want to publish your Parkinson's disease to the world, but as a very good friend of ours always says, Parkinson's is a very honest disease. I'll ultimately is going to tell. Don't ever be ashamed of your Parkinson's. You didn't do anything to get this. Now, those of us that ran behind the mosquito truck, we did not know that was a problem back in the 60s. But that was pretty cool to run through the cloud. And it actually smelled pretty good, so we liked that. But honestly, you know, there were 15 other people running through that cloud with me, and I'm the only one that got Parkinson's. So what I say is the stars and the moon align to bless you with this opportunity you have now. And you need to do something positive with it. It's a permanent part of your life, but please don't let it define you. Maintain your identity. As my good friend and fellow PD adventurer, Larry Crawford, always said, I have Parkinson's, but it doesn't have me. Larry's also our resident artist for doctors and Parkinson's slogans. The other thing is, laugh at yourself. It amazes me how folks get offended when I joke about my Parkinson's. Several years ago, I was sitting in a meeting with a good friend of mine, waiting for people to show up. And he looked at me and said, Randy, does your blood pressure medicine make you shake? I said, Jimmy, how would I know? my poor friend was so embarrassed. He was dead. You know, I just sat there killing myself laughing. He said, you shouldn't joke like that. I said, no, it's really okay. And another one, just a couple of weeks ago, I was in a friend's office, and we was reading a little slogan from our safety deal at work. It said, walking is work. He said, I said, when I do it, it is. Again, embarrassment. I've had doctors, you know, joke about it, and they say, oh, you shouldn't say that. No, you should. You need to joke about it. Laugh at yourself. If you can't laugh at yourself, then the rest of the world is they're gonna pity you. Let's see. Last but not least, please be willing to share the lessons you learned with the next person to be diagnosed, or a person you see struggling with Parkinson's, or really any other disease. Through the support groups here in Baton Rouge, I belong to the Movers and Shakers. I highly recommend you join a support group if you can. I've met some of the absolute best people I've ever known in my life there. Love every single one of them. Each one of us is as unique as our gumbo of symptoms, and you might not be a person that wants to come up here and talk before 400 people, but sometimes it's as simple as a helping hand, a hand on a shoulder, or a hug, just to give somebody a lift of their spirits forward. When I get in a slump and I need inspiration, I have lots of folks I look to. Two of them are here today, and I want to recognize them. I'd be careful here because I'm going to lose this one shortly. The first is a lady that everybody knows, Michelle Lane. Where are you, Michelle? She's outside, hobbling around with her boot on her foot. That lady absolutely wears me out. Good Lord, she has so much energy. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's when she was 32 years old, 19 years ago. She's been through numerous surgeries. She's been tireless in her pursuit of a cure through her work with the walk in New Orleans. If any of you have participated, that's a huge event. She works on that all year. She worked on Capitol Hill with the former Penn. She works with Davis Finney, and on and on and on. Again, she just wears me out. I always email Michelle at 2 in the morning when I can't sleep. She'll respond by 2:30. The other one is my good friend Larry Crawford, who made this drawing up here. Through his crafts, drawings, and stories, and volunteering leaves his mark and inspires folks wherever he goes. Larry loves to draw. He loves to do crafts. He has Mr. Potato Heads in Dr. Calegan's office. And when I did my speech therapy, I walked in and I said, Larry's been here. But he leaves definitely a trail of inspiration. When I need inspiration, these are two people I think about. For my DBS surgery, my oldest daughter, Claire, sent this card to me. I don't know if you can read it. I know the contrast is not good. It's called the Art of Kintsugi. They actually repair pottery with gold. It says, in Japan, broken objects are often repaired with gold. The flaw is seen as a unique piece of the object's history, which adds to its beauty. Consider this when you feel broken. That really touched me when she sent it, and I thought this would be a very good thing to do for people with Parkinson's, that really need a little bit of an uplift. So I decided to try my hand at it, and last night at a dinner we had, I gave Michelle her bowl, the one on the right, and I gave Larry his today. He's got it right here up front. Those are actually repaired with epoxy and 24-karat gold. So hopefully they'll cherish those. If you get one takeaway from me today, it's that ultimately you control the direction of your destiny. You may not win the war, but you can decide on which battles you're going to fight, and you can decide how you're going to fight them. I'm going to leave you with a quote from Dr. Viktor Frankl. I don't know if everybody's heard of him. He's an Austrian neurologist and psychologist, author of Man's Search for Meaning, and he said he survived the Holocaust in Auschwitz prison. He said, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. May God bless you. Thank you all.